This is Orlando Wilson. What I want to talk about in this video is something I've touched on in other videos, but a few things have happened recently which I think highlights the issues with travel advisories and a lot of the threat assessments that's been put out by a lot of the larger companies, etc., etc. One of the issues with when you're looking at risk assessments, threat assessments, travel advisories is you've got to look at who's writing the advisories, and is the advice that's being put out there, is it impartial or is it political? And sadly, I think a lot of stuff we're seeing these days, it's all political based rather than fact based. If you look at a lot of the travel advisories, even government issued travel advisories, and I've looked at some over the years, and again, it can give you good guidance on a lot of things. But I've been to countries where if you look at the travel advisory, it's a no-go area, it's dangerous, etc. And when you get to the country, it's completely different. It's peaceful. And even countries in Europe, which certain travel advisories from, again, UK, US, would say are dangerous countries to go to, I've been to, and they're very, very peaceable. I've lived in those countries. One country in particular, which if you read the travel advisories, a virtual no-go area, you know what, the people are very nice, crime is very low, etc., which is a complete contradiction to what the travel advisories are saying. Why? Well, they're politically based, that's why. They're not giving you impartial opinions, and they're not giving you the real situation in that country. Again, I've seen travel advisories put out by private companies, and again, it's been complete BS. I know a client of mine passed on a travel advisory he got from one company for one place he's doing business, and it was complete and utter fantasy. When excuse me, when the client approached the company and said, well, who wrote this travel advisory, he spoke to the people there, and the person that wrote the travel advisory had never even been to the country. And when he asked where did the information come from, oh, it's open source, it's from good sources, etc. And he questioned the sources, saying, well, this is, again, it's more politically motivated sources rather than the actual situation within the country. I'll touch on that a little bit later on in this vid. So again, whenever you're looking at risk assessments, threat assessments, travel advisories, you have to look to see what's the source, who's writing the actual advisory. A good example recently, I'm not sure when I'll put this video out, but a few days ago, I usually put these out a few months after I do them, but recently President Trump has just won the election in the US. And if you look at what mainstream media was saying, especially in Europe, they had Trump losing the election. Kamala Harris had won the election, all the polls had won the election, she'd won the election, etc. Where everything I was seeing from people I know in the United States was like, well, Trump's going to win, that's it. If you look at the polls, if you look at what mainstream media was saying, Trump was going to lose. And you know what? He would just wipe the floor with Kamala Harris and the Democrats, etc. Wipe the floor. So this is where, obviously, the polls were fake, and obviously what mainstream media was touching on, saying, okay, Trump's going to lose, was obviously made up. It was completely and utterly false. Now, even down to, I know one person, former senior militaries, got his own think tank, etc. And I was looking at some of the stuff he was putting out, and again, it was very anti-Trump. Very politically based, very globalist based, but this is somebody with a think tank that's giving people should be giving people their professional opinions. You know what? Well, I think this election just proved him completely wrong. And you know what? If people are wrong on such things as an American election, how wrong are they going to be on their other opinions? Because obviously their opinions are not factually based, they're based on politics. Now, I've spoken to, well, I deal with, again, this is my business. How many people these days, and I'm going back to what I was saying about impartiality, how many people cannot, especially in a lot of the companies that's putting out these threat assessments, risk assessments, etc., are, they cannot look at things from a non-biased opinion. And again, a lot of this is politically motivated. I've had conversations with about various hotspots in the world. And when I come up with impartial comments, they're like, oh, but that's rubbish, etc., etc. You know what? If you cannot understand both sides of a story, if your impartiality means you're looking at something with no opinion, you're looking at it so you can look at both sides of the story, then analyze what's going to go on. Sadly, these days, a lot of people, especially people, again, putting out these, that's working for the companies, that's putting out the threat assessments, risk assessments, etc., you know what? They don't understand impartiality. I remember talking to one guy a while back when Ukraine first started, and I was talking about the Russian side, this and that. And again, the guy just wouldn't listen. I couldn't have a conversation with him because, how can I put it, he's that radicalized. And a lot of people in these think tanks, etc., are politically motivated and to a point radicalized where they cannot accept both sides of the story. I think one conversation that popped up with somebody a while ago was, again, they're British, we're working for a British NGO support type organization that puts out risk assessments, threat assessments, etc. And he was on about how UK is going to fight Russia, etc. And I just laughed at him. You know, anybody that's looking at the numbers these days, no disrespect to the British military, I was in the British military, but the UK military does not have the numbers of personnel, does not have the logistics to fight Russia, period. But when I brought this up with this person, they went off. Oh, but you're unpatriotic, you this, and I'm not patriotic to anybody. But this is, you know what I mean, we could beat Russia, we could do this, we could do that. And it's like, well, look at the facts on the table. You can't, period. UK does not have the numbers, etc., etc. NATO, they're struggling in Ukraine. It's a mess. But again, if you cannot look at things from a logical point of view, if you cannot understand both sides of the story, then you should not be putting out threat assessments, risk assessments, etc. Another thing, which I'll touch on a sensitive topic now, the war with Israel, Gaza, etc. You know what? Let's talk about some facts. And again, I've wound up a lot of people about this. Let's have a fact about October 7th. Okay, Israeli intelligence failed. Their military failed because they were all stoned, they were asleep or something. Hamas was able to attack them and kick their ass. Okay, that's a fact. The fact they're still fighting Hamas after this long says there's been a major failure. Failure in intelligence, failure in military tactics, etc. What Israel done with the pagers, etc., brilliant. That operation was classic brilliance. It was old school Israeli brilliance. Okay, let's talk about Lebanon. You know what? Israel's walked into a brick wall in Lebanon because Hezbollah is very, very good. And I would rate Hezbollah, their infantry tactics, etc., as being very, very good. And why is Israel walked into a brick wall in Lebanon? Well, while Israel's been making TikTok videos, Hezbollah's been training. Hezbollah is a very effective fighting force. Okay? That's my opinion, that's impartial, that's the facts. You know what, just by saying that to a lot of people, I'm sure there's people watching that at the moment spitting at me. And you know what, that's my opinion, that's the facts on the table. But a lot of people can't even, they would get upset that I've said that because I'm being disrespectful to Israel, anti-Semitic, all the rest of the bullshit. You know what, that's the facts. Even down to, and this is where, especially in places like United Kingdom, where freedom of speech is very, very limited these days, me just saying what I've said could be classed as, I think under the latest terrorism laws they put out, that I'm, how can I put it? I forget how they termed it. I'm giving credit to a terrorist organization, be it Hamas, Hezbollah, etc. I'm not, I'm stating facts. So this is where in a lot of places, and looking now, and I had this conversation very recently with somebody, which is a reason for this video, the fact that a lot of these people, a lot of these companies that's putting out the threat assessments, risk assessments, etc., have to be very careful what they say, because from a legal perspective, if they credit recognized terrorist organizations, etc., as being competent, that could be classed as they're supporting terrorism from a UK perspective. And I think this is the latest laws they've brought out after the BS a couple of months ago, to do with some incident in UK, and they locked up a lot of people for putting memes out on social media. So this is where a lot of the companies that's putting out the bigger companies that's putting out the threat assessments, risk assessments, etc., are pandering towards NGOs and large corporations based in their own countries. And again, a lot of the NGOs and corporations based in certain countries have to follow the common narrative. And if they don't follow the common narrative, then they're not going to be getting the funding that they get from their governments. So this is where a lot of the people that's putting out the threat assessments for the NGOs, etc., you know what, they have to follow the narrative. The NGOs have to follow the common narrative. So this is where they can get away with putting out propaganda rather than fact-based threat assessments and risk assessments. So this is where my world, I deal more with entrepreneurs and people that have problems and people that need the real picture than people that need propaganda. And again, as I said, looking at what recently happened in the United States in the presidential election, where Trump was written off by how many people, and he just come in and had a landslide victory, I think that shows that a lot of the polls, the think tanks, and of course mainstream media, is they're putting out propaganda, they're putting out lies that fit the narrative rather than putting out factual information. You know what, we provide factual threat assessments, risk assessments, travel advisories, etc. And again, if you need that type of service, reach out to us. But this is where I find it amazing these days when I'm talking to a lot of the people that's working for these companies that do the threat assessment, the risk assessments, etc. And a lot of them are very, very naive, to put it politely. I wouldn't say they're naive, and to a point I would say radicalized. They have to put out what the narrative is coming out from their governments rather than factual based information. So that's just my opinion. Well, it's not an opinion, what I'm saying is fact. That's how I see things and how I've seen things from my perspective and also my clients' perspectives. So hopefully this video has upset a few people. And again, if you can't handle different opinions, then to be honest with you, you're in the wrong business. Because the security world, international risk management world, you have to understand all sides of the picture. And again, you're dealing in a very diverse world because the world is very diverse. If you're coming from a very one-dimensional background and all you want to do is push the globalist narrative, then you're putting your clients at risk and also wasting their money. So, my facts. In the meantime, follow me along on social media. We got a lot more of these videos up that talk about various aspects of the close protection business, security business, risk management business, kidnap and ransom, etc. We also supply a wide variety of, as I said, threat assessments, risk assessments, security services, etc. for generally entrepreneurs working in the emerging markets. And again, we're an impartial company. We have no political, financial backers. So we're independent. We're not owned by other people. So in the meantime, follow me along on social media, check out my books on Amazon, and if you've got any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. In the meantime, be good, stay safe, stay out of trouble, and always question the sources of information that you're being provided with.